Welcome to She Chose Joy, where we discuss all things love, freedom, wellness, and joy. I'm your host, Melanie Foote-Davis, also known as the Soul Whisperer. Your relationship with having enough, feeling enough, and being enough. When my guest, Barbara Burgess, knows a thing or two about that. She's an author, a mother, executive, and an unapologetic dark chocolate lover who's embraced the beautiful messiness of life, including her not enoughness. She's the founder of Corluma, a consultant, Chicago-based consultant firm. She wrote, performed a one-woman show, and most recently wrote her first book, Enough: Finding Peace in a World of Distractions, Hustle, and Expectation. Miss Barbara says she's still figuring it out, but aren't we all? And let me tell you, she's figured out enough to really bless my soul in this episode. So let's dive in. Well, hello there, Barbara.
Hello.
Welcome to She Chose Joy. I am so delighted to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a total privilege and honor.
Yeah, it's so many things that I would love to chat about. I
Mm-hmm.
know that we probably won't get to them all, but I have to share that when I was reading this lovely book, Enough, um, my heart really smiled at several things, but I'll start with one. There's this chalk experience
Mm-hmm.
you talk about, and um, and it really warmed my heart, not partially because of what you shared, but
Yeah.
so there was this moment when I said, "Oh wait, my daughter used to tell me about this sidewalk chalk. Wouldn't it be amazing if Barbara's home was the one she was experiencing? That would have been so cool." So anyway, I said all of that to say, would you please share like your inspiration about your chalk experience, what it is, and where it led you to?
Yeah, and I will say, I would love to pretend that it was planned and that I intentionally did this, but it wasn't. This is what I love about how spirit moves and the world works. But I had been just cleaning out some things, and my kids are older now, so we're not at the days of sidewalk chalk as we used to be. And so I found a whole big container of it on a shelf in my front closet, and I thought, I'm just going to set this out. I mean, somebody might as well use it. And I found an old jar in our garage on the floor and just set them out. And I, jotted down, please write, chalk, or draw. It's just really wanted it to be an invitation to folks. And really it was for that purpose of it being used and, and then having its life for the moment. But it really was the moment that began this journey of the book and of enough for me, because that first day I had set it out, and I had, in addition to writing that, I had drawn a couple of colorful circles, with the intent of like, I love creative things. I'm just going to draw some colorful circles. And I took my laptop and I plopped on my porch, and my porch is deep enough that like you can't really see me from the street, and I can't necessarily see who's there, but I heard, this little lovely being and their parent, walking by, like clearly begging to chalk. And, I resonate with the parent who's like, I mean, you could tell they're on their phone and they're busy and they don't have the time, right? But that little being was so relentless that eventually the parent kind of gave in, and you could hear that sort of reluctant but sweet, surrender. And so they were out there, and just listening to them was a sweet thing, because it went from the parent being distracted to, this little boy that was like talking to himself in the sweetest way, like, oh, a little more blue here, a little more green there. He was having this, conversation that was so beautiful and musical. And the parent eventually joined in, where they were like making little sweet comments. Oh, look at that, And so it's like this background, soundtrack. And I'm working away on my laptop, and I was curious what was going on, but I also didn't want to sort of it felt like a sacred space I didn't want to disrupt. And so it wasn't till a little bit later when I didn't hear them anymore. And it felt like this, the footsteps had moved on and that kind of thing, that I thought, oh, I'm going to go see what's down there. Assuming, of course, being a parent, like I figured this is some scribble that probably resembles an animal, but that you would never know, right? It's like, oh, mom, that's a cat. And you're like, oh, I thought it was a pudding, And so I go down, I pop down the stairs to take a look, and I literally uh, was stopped in my tracks. Like, I still, to this moment, it practically brings tears, because this little boy had taken those, circles, and he had turned them into planets. Like, he had put rings around them, and he put stars and all this thing that it was beyond anything I could have imagined at the moment. It was so not what I was picturing. And it reminded me of, when I first saw pictures of space and how it looks like art, and I just was stopped. I couldn't move, and tears like pulled up in me. And I had this warm sense of just like in my body in that moment being so enfolded, like with this sense of peace and meaning and love and all the things that matter, like just in this really tiny micro moment standing on my sidewalk. And that's in the book is called Enough, and I talk about enough as a companion, because I felt like that was the moment she entered my life in a deep and profound way, where it was like, it's like this old ancient sense that we all should have but forget about what really matters. And so I had that experience, and then it was like that began and set off this whole contagion of, whether it was me having new experiences or noticing the experiences I was already having but wouldn't have brought the meaning to, I don't know. But it truly defined for me this sense of enough, of peace that lives in between the cracks and all that kind of thing. And it was a turning point for me. And when I reflected on it later, like, I never intended to sort of write this book about this topic, but I had just been journaling when I was at a coffee shop about the experience. And what I realized was like the beautiful abundance of life, in the sense that this didn't cost me money. These were things I had around my home anyway. I was simply clearing them out and putting them of use to people and placing them there. And so it has been, a turning point in my life. But we were sharing a little bit before we officially started today, but it has become this crazy avalanche. Like, we are known for this. Like, it's like, it could have been my sidewalk your daughter walked by, because it turned into like me getting these love notes from people who live in the neighborhood, like, people writing hearts, people writing well wishes, people who are really good at cartoons and things. Like, I have seen, I'm not exaggerating, 2 weeks ago, I walked out and looked, and somebody had created what I would consider like a gorgeous mandala, like an unbelievable piece of artwork, and so I'm constantly moved. And then like every now and then I'd be out there refilling the chalk or whatever it was, and people would stop by and they'd introduce themselves like, oh, I'm your, I remember the one woman, she's like, I'm your night artist. I make the cartoon, the comics on my way home from work at night. So she's there under the street lamp in the dark, sketching these things. And we've had people replace the chalk more times than I can count. I had a man, kind of terrify me, knock on my door at night with him and his dog, but it was because he felt so bad because the dog had knocked over the jar and he wanted to replace it. And sure, I was like, it's not necessary, but sure enough, the next day, there's a new jar sitting there. I mean, it just became this thing of, for all the divisiveness we have in our world, of unity, of coming together. And I think where words can get very divisive, and I will sometimes put on there, no religion, no politics, no any, like, that's not what the sidewalk is for. But it's like these shared pictures on our hearts that we have in common, and so it's just become this beautiful movement. That's why I call it the chalk experience, because it's ongoing and it is an experience I have more pictures than I can count. I wish I would have gotten pictures that first day. I just didn't know it was going to turn into what it turned into, but I have so many that just move me.
Yeah. This is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. It's so many pieces in here that I want to like unpack. Like, one being that the mom who was busy suddenly paused because
Yes.
of this child's insistence on like the child's desire to follow his own yearning.
Yes.
and how it prompted her to actually become more engaged in the experience. And it also reminds me of how much possibility is there if we just take a moment to play. Like just
Yes.
play and just tap into that part of us that wants to explore to see where things go. And so when you said, I believe you said when spirit, how spirit moves.
Hmm.
And so just want to even express my gratitude to you for even following your own yearning to do that.
Mm.
And when you felt led to do it, that you did. Because whether my daughter was passing your home and experiencing it or inspired by someone else, it still feels so connected.
Yes.
Whether it was your home or someone else's, because when she used to call me to tell me what the sidewalk chalk said today, she would light up and I also light up with my,
Yes.
you know?
Well, and to your point about the possibilities, right? And I think also I just want to acknowledge what you were saying, because even that, and then I'm thinking about, the title of this your podcast, She Chose Joy, right? As a parent, sometimes like the our kids want to play, but we're busy and things. And I fully reserve the right to be like, no, not now, right? To draw those boundaries and things. But, there is something in children, whether we birth them or not, that is this natural inclination toward joy,
Yeah.
toward and it doesn't mean to have to always be happy smiling joy. It's just toward that sense of something new, exploring, trying something out that's so much more unedited than we are. And I still think, to your point, it took a decision point for that mother to say, I'm going to surrender to this moment. Like, she might have had 3,000 other things on her mind, but to take the pause. And I think that's the invitation. And even this, I think when I think back, even to being able to have that moment came after, leaving a job I had been at for 20 years and starting my own business. And when I started that business, I don't talk about this in the book, but what I had chosen at that point in time, that spirit, God, love, however you define it, was my CEO. Like, that's who I work for. And so even for me, whether I'm, doing a consulting engagement or putting chalk outside or whatever, it's not a fuzzy thing to say, I'm going to follow spirit. It is actually a choice, right? It's to say, I wonder what I'm being led to in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. And also surrendering to the fact that there aren't rights and wrongs in there. Like, I really do think life is this great, divine cosmic experiment we're meant to engage in, but we don't choose that. We choose these other paradigms of like, I have to do this, I got to do this, then I need to do this, right? And I think the beauty of this book and how enough came into my life is she, I think, probably reintroduced me to those little pauses, those little moments, to whether it's reflect on what is already there or to create something new out of that moment. And even to your point, the funny thing is, so my husband started a new job a couple of weeks ago. And that morning when I went on my morning walk, whoever had, chalked the night before, the day before, was like, today's going to be a great day. Enjoyed it. Like, there's just these lovely things that I took a picture and I texted it to him. I mean, this is in front of our house, but it was like, hey, I guess this is, what the message is you're supposed to hear for the day, right? So it's something that just definitely kind of keeps on giving in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. Because those things, it doesn't necessarily mean you're leaping off of buildings and skipping down the street, but those are the moments that just tickles our heart.
Yes.
It
Well,
just
and to your point about not skipping, sometimes if I'm really depressed,
yeah.
there's a little something there that brightens me up, right? That is a give back. And this is one of the things I do talk about in the book that I know is a little trite, but I really do think more than we realize, the gift is with the giver. Like, people will look at it and be like, I literally have been thanked so many times that we do this chalk thing as if it was an initiative. I planned and do all this work, and it's not, right? I was cleaning out a shelf, but the beauty of is in that giving, the receiving I have experienced
Yes.
is so profound and so deep and so meaningful and so ongoing that, and didn't cost a thing, right? And so I think that reminder for me that the smallest of acts of our just opening ourselves up
Mhm.
can fill us up so much in moments that we need it in ways we can't even anticipate.
I agree so much with what you just said because there are times when I've been the recipient of something that started with me giving in some small way or what felt like some small way.
Yeah.
But what I received in return was far greater than whatever time or energy it took for me to do that very thing. And then I
Yeah.
just want to take a moment to even, I don't know if you even remember this, but there was a time when you and I met for coffee and I was really challenged with like how to describe what I do, all of these things. And you graciously wrote me a brief bio. And you said you are a self-care coach for executive women because women like me could use you. And you wrote this bio for me and said, feel free to use it. Um, I didn't ask you to do it.
Mm.
I don't think I was insinuating anything to say, but you did that. You gave that from your heart. And it gave me a framework to use. And within about a week or so later, when an opportunity presented itself and they asked me for a bio, I had one ready because of that gift you gave.
Mm. It's funny because, I remember exactly where I was sitting in the coffee shop when we had coffee that time. It's
Yeah.
interesting how certain of these moments in life just get burned in our brain.
Mhm.
But it's funny because what I see in my mind's eye, I just saw a lot of light. It's like we were meeting and we were talking, but then there was something beyond the words, right?
Yeah.
And to your point, I think this is part of the confusion about us in the world right now is we're in this mindset that's so limiting about what we need to and have to do. And I had the opportunity and privilege to be able to put on a one woman show last year. And part of the premise is there's two of me, one that's the one that people know here, and one is someone who's living an alternate but parallel reality in a world that has the exact same resources that we do, has exact same possibilities, exact same things, except that they've made different choices. And part of it is that, right? Like in that world, people don't work because they have to or because there's money to exchange, et cetera. It's just that there are these things on their heart they love to do. And so in that, it brings great joy. And so in this, it ends up being called grace. But in the world of grace, there are people who love to tend to children. There are people who love to make food. There are people who love to organize. There are people who love to build. And everybody does all the things they love on their heart and everything's taken care of, right? And I believe that somewhere deeply in my bones and in my DNA. And if I think back to that writing, like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but it wasn't for you. It was for me. I was like, oh, this is really out. This is clear. This is fun. I can't wait to do this, and it's almost presumptuous on the other side. Like you might have rolled your eyes and been like, who do you think you are? I don't need a bio. Thank you so much. But you graciously received it. And so I got to have the benefit of that sharing, which was beautiful as well. And I think it's what's possible when we get out of the transactional mode and
Yeah.
into the real being with each other mode. Then it becomes so infinitely, joyful in that way.
That is so huge, so huge. In so many different ways. And let me just share too, that bio, that opportunity that showed up for me right after that, the clients that I attracted who are now my friends years later.
Oh
You
my goodness.
that experience led to another thing, which led to another thing. And so I just, I'm just forever grateful, with you seeing something in me and offering yourself in that way.
Mm. Well, it fills me up when you say that because I think about, so I have this baseball cap. I made like 5 of them and gave them all away except my one that I wear periodically. It just says hope on it.
Mhm.
And I gave it, I realized at some point in time, like there's some artwork I do by hand. And so I made a couple of my own shirts. I made this hat. I made a couple other things. But it was like, we're so in this world of living other people's logos. And I thought, I would prefer to have on things that represent the things that matter to me. But all that to say is, for me, that is what brings hope when I think things can be very difficult. Again, whether it's something in the world or our jobs, or we just get up against these walls, I think those moments remind me of kind of the infinite possibilities of what's so. But I think it's very easy to think they don't matter, right? Because we can't see how that seed had a repercussion. And so a lot of my choosing, like this is, again, could be perceived as a silly thing, but I was in a restroom yesterday at a coffee shop and there was a couple pieces of paper on the floor. And so I used tissue to pick up those papers and put them in the trash because I read years ago, a part of Bucky Fuller's book where he talked about, that like every little thing matters like that, including how we leave a space, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not that I always do it. I don't feel obligated. It's not in my job description for myself. But when I do, I feel like, those little moves do matter somehow in a way I could never measure. And it's not my business to decide the relative value of those actions. And
Mhm.
so when you're saying, I'm just moved by what you're reflecting back, because it's just one of those proof points that we don't always know, the little kindnesses and the impact they have. And I got to enjoy the giving.
Hi, I'm Michelle Akins, executive coach and author, and I specialize in helping high-capacity leaders align their inner values with their outer goals. In my 6-week group coaching program, Clarity, you'll experience a supportive space for reflection, clarity, and growth. Through powerful questions, deep listening, and guided insight, you'll uncover what's next and gain the confidence and tools to pursue it with purpose. If you're ready for a shift, let's rewrite the script together. Go to michelleakins.com and click on the tab Work with Michelle. Look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to pause here for a moment to do a celebration. One woman show. That takes a lot of courage. Okay. That takes a lot of courage and commitment
Yeah.
to have that and then step into it. You're actually the second one of my other friends, Leanne Webster, I'm not sure if you know her or not. She did a one woman show that I had the privilege of going
Mm.
to actually see and experience. And I was telling her, I don't know about a one woman show, but it did get me to thinking about doing like a storyteller, that podcast,
Yes.
something where you share briefly, like I'm really playing with this idea of
Yeah.
experimenting with that. So thank you for your courage to do that and being another living example of someone that I can reach out and touch that's already done it. Not someone I'm reading about, um, whom I may never meet, but someone who's this close to me who's already done something that I'm toying with.
Well, I love that visual that you were just sharing of you doing it. Like, again, I can kind of see it happening already. And, it's dangerous to get around me because I'll probably support you to do it because I can't control myself that way. But, what was interesting about that show was that um, it was like without a needed result. It wasn't a trend. It was because this show had started writing itself, which is a whole nother story. But a lot of it had vulnerabilities in it. I shared certain things about my childhood. I had my whole body exposed, I in tight clothing where there are all the parts that don't fit. I had and talked about that. All these different pieces, but it was one of those things that, I had said literally in the, program that people got when they came in. I thought, if nothing else, like the goal of this would be to say, gosh, if she could do that, what could I do? Right. Because it wasn't like, okay, I don't have formal training. I've not been commissioned. I da 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 da. But I think life is so short for us not to express so many of the beautiful things that come to our heart, but we think we can't because we
Mhm.
only need to do if it pays it, or if we've been trained in it, or if it's this or that. And it's like, gosh, that's so limiting. And I think as, beings, we have so many possibilities. And I remember being almost in this elevated state for many weeks after that performance because it just took all the rules away to a great degree. Is like, okay, if you can do that, like you could kind of do anything. So I'm looking forward to when you invite me to that vision that you just described.
So it's so funny because I just had another memory hearing you say that, about you, the way that I experienced you. And that was receiving a call from someone, um, who was asking me about something. But what they said was they got my name from you and that you were holding a vision for me.
That's a
And
fact.
yeah, that you were holding a vision for me. And so those are things, this is the impact that you've had
Mm,
on my life over the years. And so I can only imagine how the many ways that you've shown up, just being yourself and
mm,
being in support of someone else. I mean, really making a difference. And so I'm thinking about what you just said about letting all the rules go and this book, Enough.
mm.
In many ways, I don't know if the play was before the book or after.
I was already like in the final of the book when
Okay.
the play started coming. I mean, I was already in editing and rearranging chapters. So yeah, the book was first.
Yeah.
But it was a different thing still.
And I'm just curious as to a couple of things. Like one, just opening up the dedication and seeing how you personify Enough.
Mm.
I thought was really beautiful, and I'm actually going to read it. It says, "This book is dedicated to you, my dear friend, Enough. Thank you for trusting me to tell our story with all its magnificent imperfections. I feel a bit shy about asking, but if you are amenable, I invite you to move in permanently. I have a vacancy in my heart with Not Enough's recent departure. Sorry if the place is a bit messy. So feel free to set the remainder of his belongings at the curb." I appreciated that so much. It like tears welled up.
I'm tearing right now as you're
And
reading that.
because there are, like there may have been experiences of not enough, but I think mine is more not worthy, rank
Hmm.
ranks a little higher in the way that
Yep.
it shows up, and not enough is sometimes comes out to play with her.
Yep.
And so just hearing you reading this, feeling into this, and then even hearing how you didn't let rules stand in the way of the one with Michelle, the chalk experience, any of that. Like enough was present somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Being
Well,
out.
and what I appreciated in you reading that back is, part of it for me is the understanding and acceptance that these are things we lean into in our lives, like we increasingly do. And so enough did come in as a real entity for me at that chalk experiment moment when I had seen those beautiful planets, but she had like ridden alongside for a very long time in a lot of these spaces. And I wasn't naive enough to pretend not enough wasn't right there,
Yeah.
next to her, and for you not worthy. And there's something about personifying them, turning them into characters, which creates a little distance and a little bit more facility to choose,
Mhm.
because I think, and that's one of my tips when people are working on this relationship with enough, is to give not enough or not worthy or whatever, give it a name, give it a character, give it a whatever, because then we can notice when it comes in, but it is not us. And I
Yeah.
think that's the trick in making the distinction. But when you were reading that, I appreciate the grace I give myself increasingly to not be perfect, to not have it handled. It's not like, oh, I discovered enough and now my life has changed and everything's amazing and I never, do things that aren't in alignment with my values. No, that's not true. It's
Mhm.
just I notice more. And I notice when I do and I notice when I don't, because I think in the whole, for me, I get to be human in this whole aspect. And it truly was like by that time I had written the forward long after the book was done, and I had had so many beautiful experiences, but it was a true invitation on my heart of, okay, you've been sitting here holding my hand, letting me sit in your lap, whisper to me in, crowded rooms and things like that. And, it was a true earnest invitation. Like, I'd love to have you be more of the regular fabric. I'd love to have you live in my space in a way I had unconsciously allowed the
Yeah.
not enough voice to move in at a very early age before I even noticed and
Yeah.
take up way too much space. Right. And I think all of these limiting beliefs we have can do that.
Mm.
But I think sometimes we underestimate what it is to release them. Or, I often say to people, it's not like not enough is gone for me. I
Yeah.
just have the volume turned down so much more. And
Mhm.
when I hear that voice, I can notice it and go, okay, I see you there. I'm watching you. I got an eye on you. Yeah, no, we're not going to go there. No.
Yeah. And the
Mhm.
way I see it also is that not enough can sometimes show up or, through other relationships in our lives, right?
Yep.
And speaks through them. And so the way that you mentioned, like not enough coming into the home and having his own drawer, starting to leave things there and taking up residence, that's something that is a very familiar scenario
Yeah.
to consider that people can relate to. And sometimes we may meet not enough when we are out um, interacting, just going about our day. We may experience them through an encounter through another individual because their not enoughness is what we're actually
Well, and I'm so glad you said
experiencing.
that, because I think the in this journey, I became increasingly, and continue to do so, discerning about my relationships and discerning about where I spent my time and my life force and all those kinds of things. And I have a perfect example of one of those. So I had published the book. It was already out, friends had bought it, et cetera. I was at a dinner, and a guy that I know had been sitting next to me, and we started this conversation, and it started out sounding very innocent. you know, I laugh. I walk into these things sometimes. And he was like, oh, he's talking about his own writing and how great this was that I was writing, and that he'd love to. It was almost like he was invited, like, gosh, we should share at each other's things, right? Which I appreciate anybody who's going for anything. And it started out that way. And then he just landed the big insult without even realizing it. He's like, yeah, because, I read your book and I could really give it a good edit.
Oh,
And
wow.
now let's be straight. Part of the journey of publishing this book was not being perfectionistic. I could have edited that book 5 more times before I put it out there. And Enough's voice just kept saying to me, honey, that's not what we're doing here. That
Yeah.
is not the point. We're not putting out perfection. That is the total opposite of what this whole journey is all about. Birth it. We got more to do, right? And so, but it was right there. It was like, it felt so easy and familiar, and we're sliding into this space, and all of a sudden, bam, there was not enough.
Yeah.
And and so again, I did a good job of kind of holding my boundaries, which is a big part of what I talk about in the book as well,
Yeah.
and not allowing that into my space too much. And then I used it later to write a rage poem, which is a good way to channel kind of those moments. But there it was, like, already published, and there I was in a relationship. And what I learned is, this person, like, I'm again becoming increasingly discerning, it's someone I'll still be in contact with my life, but this is not someone I want in my inner circle. I don't need someone in my tight spaces who's here to observe all the things that are not quite right about what I'm doing. I'm like, oh yeah, I've done that. That's very familiar. I
Yeah.
know how to invite those people into my lives, but I don't have space for them, because again, she not only has taken over a drawer, but a closet and a room and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
like, I appreciate you, and I know that you're on your journey. And I do know, when I can get in my spaces of empathy, of understand, like, this is someone who really is very well trained in his life. Like, he's had exposure to a lot of literature and dynamics and world travel and all that kind of stuff. And he's always talked about writing, but he hasn't done anything with it yet. So, like, I know that part of it is, like you said, his sense of not enough showing up, but doesn't mean the dagger doesn't hurt any less.
No, and the thing is, it's like the audacity. Like, I didn't gently. When you said that, I saw myself putting him on the curb, right?
Yeah.
Um, and and the thing is, like, I can relate to, like my book is my perfectly imperfect book.
Yeah.
Right? And there are many ways that, even with it being imperfect, that I know I played it safe in what I shared,
Yeah.
trying to protect the people involved, all of these other things. And so I know my next book will be a different
Yes.
you know, uh, I'll be stepping in a little deeper and being even more vulnerable. But yes, it's something about putting your work out there that's already very vulnerable
Yeah.
anyway. Um, And we know people are going to critique it and judge it. And so my wish, like with that, I wrote mine for myself as well too. I needed to get it finished. I needed to get it out there.
Yeah.
And my hope was that someone walked away with at least one thing. If it
Yeah.
was one thing, then I felt like my job was done. And if they didn't, then the one thing was that I actually completed it. And that's
Exactly.
me.
Well, I to your point, I've been listening to a lot of kind of like comedians and things lately. You know, I'm trying to weave more laughter into, that's part of my choosing joy, right?
Yeah.
Is having more things to laugh at, but just about understanding, like somebody who's a stand-up comedian or who writes for sketch shows or does any of those kind of things, like they write 1,000 things that never land, you
Yeah.
know, and then they have a couple that land. But the part of the process of birthing is to constantly be creating. And that's one of the things for myself as well of, and this is what I knew in my DNA, like we've got more to come. And if you hang on to this, there is no room or space for baby number 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, right? And so I think too much, again, we restrict ourselves with these rules that maybe other people make up, but we buy into. But the truth is, life is not static. We are not static. Everything is dynamic and constantly changing. And given that that's the case, like I am not the same I'm rereading a book that I read in my 20s, and it is fascinating because it is a different book. It is like I've never seen it before because I am not the same human, right? And
Mhm.
so I think part of the invitation for us is to take away even that restriction, to say somehow something's supposed to be at a certain level, you know, before we do it. Like I would like even if I had 18 editors and did it perfectly, the person I would become 2 years later would have a different viewpoint. And I think we have to be willing to do that and allow all of that change. And I can't, you know, I call it imperfection, but it's really not that, because that implies that there's some perfect state to be in. And that's just not my spiritual beliefs. You know, I've said to, you know, a couple folks over time, you know, my belief is at the end of days that, you know, if there's such a thing as God, that it whatever will be like, so what'd you think? How'd it go? Did you enjoy yourself? You know, I don't think it's going to be, you know, my strict Catholic upbringing of, well, here's the list of the things you did really well, and here's the list of the sins that, you know, and here's all the things you were supposed to do. I just don't think that's how it's going to go. And if it is, like, I still don't choose to orient my life that way. Therefore, you know, this is a playground, and I see how much I have, like to your point, how much I've constrained myself, how much I've limited myself, et cetera. And it's not like I'm going to be 100% unleashed tomorrow, but I get to lean into that. I get to lean into being less edited and less caring what people think, et cetera. So in many ways, again, even that interaction was a bit of a gift, because I got to exercise the muscle who's like, are you kidding me? And I got to make another poem out of it.
It's the thing too, like even someone who's trained in whatever area it is, like there are stories after stories after stories of, let's just say, for instance, vocalists who
Mm,
wanted to sing a certain thing, but the record company said they couldn't put that song out. And then
yeah.
later you find out when they do, that's the one that put them on the map.
Yep.
And so it's like, just because someone is labeled as an expert doesn't mean they are the expert of your life. Like,
Yes.
I get to have sovereignty of my own choices, my own life, my own passions, and the way I choose to step into them. And
Yes.
you have that same invitation to have agency over your own, and it may look differently, and I may see it from another perspective, but that doesn't make me the authority over how you get to be who you are.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
like
I think we don't realize how much we put those authorities in their places, and we give them the power, right? To that point, you know, I was the one, and I write this at the beginning of the book, I was the one that had built a monument to not enough. I
yeah,
was the one who had carefully crafted that. Did I have life experiences that informed that? Of course I did. But I was the one that was putting that up as if it mattered, right? And I loved what you said about that sovereignty, because I do think that's an opportunity that we get to do and we get to lean into over time. And I've said this to many friends over the last year in particular, but I am very much at this stage of my life allergic to experts. I spent so much of my youth pursuing them and discovering and learning, and that has its own appropriate place when we're just exploring. But I'm so not interested in what your expertise is and what you have to tell me. What I'm so interested in is, what's your soul curious about right now? What are you in wonder about? What are you in the unknown about? What are you discovering? Because expertise has a static nature to it, and those are not the kind of humans that interest me so much. I want to hear about your failures. I want to hear about your learnings. I want to hear about what wounds your heart and what uplifts you. And none of that is expertise. It is experience, and it is engaging in this journey of life in a very mutual human way. And in this phase of my life, I love Alex L, how she says seasons of life. In this season of my life, I choose to surround myself with people who are, almost beginning all over again, who are exploring what this is. That's why I love being around younger people, because they don't have as much of that cage put around them yet.
Yeah.
And so, really stretching into what those possibilities are. And in those spaces, there's not a lot of room for expertise. Now, the kind of expertise that I love is someone who's so passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
They can't wait to tell you. Like, I love the octopus. I will watch any documentary on an octopus. I want it, it's on my bucket list that an octopus touches me before I die. I have all, I love it. So if I happen to meet a quote unquote expert about octopuses who was telling me about all the cool things I don't know, I would love that. But it's different. It's more about them sharing their passion and their joy versus, well, here's what I know and where you're wrong about it, right? Like, I just have no space for that.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that was what had me spiraling at the time that we met that day in the coffee shop. It was that whole thing about how to position myself so that someone could even see the value that I bring. And it took me, really, to be honest, maybe a few weeks ago, it hit me that a part of my challenge was that, I worked with women in leadership anyway already, but in terms of the B2B space, it felt like everyone around me, my peers who were successful in this space that were having like B2B business, were all former executives. And that's not my story.
Yeah.
However, I was already coaching, working with them anyway. They already trusted me. And so it hit me a few weeks ago that a part of the thing is that there's something in me that's always known that the way corporate is set up doesn't align with my values or my being. And so I am a better partner to corporations than I am an employee.
Yes.
And that really landed so much differently for me. But that was what had me stuck about writing a bio. And so you offering me a framework to play with in that season of my life it was just so huge for me, because it took that overthinking off my plate. And that was all centered around this whole expertise thing.
Yes. And I just was realizing as you were saying that what I dislike about the expertise is it often lacks authenticity.
Yeah.
Because it's a limited viewpoint of how we're measuring an expertise. And much of our world's expertise is based on credentials, which also is based on opportunity. And opportunity has intentionally systemic bias within it. And so what I love about people is their experience, their felt experience of things. And so, to really understand and value what is the authenticity. Like when you and I talked in the coffee shop that day, what I could hear is the authenticity of what mattered to you, where you had served, the differences you had made. And it was only through this other lens that you were comparing that didn't have as much value. And I was like, gosh, that just doesn't matter. Like, who cares? Right. And the people that care are not your people. People that care are not my people. Bless them. They get to have their journey as much as I get to have mine, but it's such a limited view of what's possible. And I think that's the thing. Like even in the One Woman Show, I talk about, if the universe is always expanding, if science is accurate about that, and we truly are constantly expanding, then the pie that's available is always expanding. And I
Yeah.
think back to, I had somebody that's a dear friend and consultant when I was doing the book, and said, by the way, when you launch that book, you will find a dozen other books called Enough with all different things and blah, 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 blah. And they said, please don't pay attention to it. Like that is not your book. Your book is this authentic, resonant ring that came from within you that you felt called to put out. And that's all that matters. And the rest of it is irrelevant. And it's really helped me, not just for the book, but for anything I want to do. I may do a certain kind of art and I see someone doing it better. Well, if that limits me from putting mine out there, what a crime that is. And I do share this quote in the book, and it was something I had seen on a postcard when I was like 12 or 13 on vacation. It's a Henry Van Dyke quote, but it's that one that says, use what talents you possess. The woods would be silent if no bird sang except those that sang the best, right? And so truly think about that. If we had ranked everybody on their ability to sing and we only let the top singer sing, how much music would we be missing? I guarantee there's so many artists for whom we would have zero exposure that bring much joy to many people. And we all have different tastes. There's certain kinds of music that uplift me, certain that doesn't. And the stuff that doesn't uplift me uplifts somebody else.
Yeah.
But who am I to prejudge the value of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of which, we're going back to like all of this really ties into what we say yes and what we say no to.
Mm-hmm.
And I love your play on little no's and big no's and little yeses and big yeses. I won't share yet. I'll just see if you mention it first. But I'll say this part. I began delighting in small no's. I stopped giving reasons. I stopped justifying or explaining, and I made no apology. I simply said no.
Mm-hmm. And that was my journey. And again, I say, like, there's a lot of books on boundaries and how to draw them and et cetera. What was so interesting for me is how the more I leaned into my own sense of enough, the more these became clear. It's just like the example we were giving about discerning in relationships. And I was sort of sobered to see how many little yeses I had made to things that I didn't really desire. And in the book I talk about it, how our lives get crowded with those little yeses, not the big yes. Oh yeah, I'm coming to your wedding or whatever it is. It's the little yeses, like, yes, I'll attend that fundraiser. Yes, I'll take that gift from you. Yes, I'll store that thing from you. Yes, I'll help do this thing, right? If we're not careful, those little yeses really become our life. It's crowded out to the point where we don't even know. And I give that example, like, it's like hoarding. All of a sudden it's like our home is filled with this crap that we never even intentionally welcomed in. And I think that's the danger of it. And so in order to not, build a life on those little yeses, I had to learn to say the little no's, because I had gotten good at the big no's. Like early in my life, I would not have said no or disagreed with anyone. I was a people pleaser or chameleon. I don't even think people pleasing. It's not like I always pleased people, but I definitely like monitored them to see what would be the most amenable choice. And over time, I learned to really assert myself when things were highly not value aligned. That was a muscle I developed. And so, but that one became easy. It's like when it's so obvious that the answer is no, I could roar up and say, you will not do that, right? But the little no's are way harder. And it is just to say, like, somebody invited me somewhere. And, I remember this exact experience of what I used to do is look at my calendar and see if the space was available. And if it was available, then I'd say yes. Well, that's only one very small, question to whether or not I should go. Is the space available is one factor, but do I feel like it? Maybe I feel like it now, but I won't feel like it then. Maybe there's a lot of variables that go into this. Okay, the space I'm going to, is that something that I will leave feeling more uplifted and expanded? Or will I leave feeling less than or down? There's just nuances that come into this. And so part of it was practicing these small no's. And they first came with reasons. They first came with these, little like, I'm busy, I'm blah, 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 And then the next version of me was to not give the explanations, to just say, no, but thank you for asking, because I do feel genuine about someone wanting me to be in a space with them. I feel that is a generous offer on their part, that they think I would be a value add to whatever they're going to. And so it's honest to say, thank you for the invitation, but no, and it's interesting because I have certain friends who know this about me now, and, they're in their own parallel experiences. And so they'll be like, there was a friend who called me on a weekend, and there's something we were both mutually invited to, and I had already declined. And she had, rung me and said, so just out of curiosity, she goes, are you going to that event? And I said, no. And she goes, okay, so is this one of your no-nos? Or is this like, because you really have a hard conflict? And I said, no, it's just not a fit for me, but it was not an insult for her. She was curiously in the journey with me, because she was learning how to discern. And it was the person I cared about a lot, but the space that it would have been in and the other people that would be there would not have been filling for me. They would have been a little bit more upsetting and that kind of thing. And so I preciously guard my life force in a different way. And it was just simply no. And what I have learned is that does really upset certain people. Certain people feel like if you have the space and I have asked you, you should be there. And what I've realized for myself is those people aren't necessarily, again, in my inner ring. So it's not that I'm going to cut them out of my lives, but if my relationship with you is dependent on me giving to you because you think I should, not because I have determined inside myself that it's an alignment, then we probably can't be intimate friends. It just isn't a fit, because I have a different relationship with my life and my boundaries and my energy in a way. And that's more of, I say the phase I'm leaning into now is much more unapologetic in general. I get to do whatever I want to do. I get to make my choices, and that will upset people. And that's not my problem. It's not mine to do anything about. It's mine to continually orient from the inside out.
I love that. I love that. And I so align with that. I'm still practicing it, the saying
Yeah.
no, thank you.
I
Because
think we all are. I still practice it. I joke, this book, I say it wasn't written for anyone but myself, because once it came out, once it was published, is when the themes really started to wake up in me in a profound way. So because I have written about it, it's like my little bell that rings in the background. Like I'm still learning to do it in a way that's resonant.
yeah, it takes so much energy from, like, it really is can be a depleting resource when we're
Yeah.
saying yes to something we absolutely want to say no to. Like,
Yeah.
even thinking about the drive there, or the commute there, and what are you going to wear, and all of the preparation to even get to the event that you really
Yeah.
have no desire to go to anyway, is not the highest and best use of our resources.
Yeah.
When you, like, sometimes in this, you may not necessarily have anything else to do other than be with you, and that's okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
My conflict might be I plan to read a book, rest on my couch, and space out. And that is as or more important to me than your fundraiser. And bless you. And I might even send a check, but I'm not, it's not how I'm going to spend my time. And I think we get to constantly choose those things because I do love novelty. And so sometimes there's some things that I'm not sure if they're going to be the right use of my effort and energy, but I go just to have the experience of trying something new, meeting new people, being in a different situation to figure it out. And I get to choose that as well. I think the aim is just the conscious choice. I
Yeah.
don't want to become a default, because I think life is meant to be experienced and lived and experimented. And so I don't want to get in that rut of like, I'm later in life, but I don't want to be at the end and be like, oh, that was all everybody else's desires. None of that had anything to do with me.
Yeah, I've been practicing, and I'm still I'm still learning what that is. Like, my
Mhm.
desire is to go to events that I want to go to anyway. Like, even when it relates to business events, right? There used to be a thing you go because you that whole, it was strategy around networking, which I don't like that word, and that's a conversation for another day. But I'm in a place, and now I'm in a place where I just want to go to events that I actually want to be at anyway,
Yeah.
and with people whom I enjoy doing things I enjoy. Like a
Yeah.
friend of mine has a charcuterie business, and she had a launch event, and I was so excited for her and what she was birthing, and I know how passionate she is about it, and I just know like her energy is always just so good. Like she just is a beautiful presence to be around.
Yeah.
And I literally, this pulled me in so much so that my car was in the shop. I literally was in a rental car and drove an hour on a Wednesday evening to go to the
Mm,
event. And that didn't feel like stress to me. It
yes.
actually, and I had the best time on a
Yes.
Wednesday night, meeting the people, enjoying the energy, seeing her in her element. And I'm like, that's the way that I want to spend my time.
Yes. And that's where you know, even in your discernment there, realize like it isn't a mechanical thing. It's not about the commute. It's not about the time. It's again the when you thought of going, it delighted you, you know. And so it didn't matter that the car was not working. It didn't matter that it was a Wednesday night and an hour away. If it internally brought some sense of joy and delight, then the answer is yes. You know, it doesn't have to be logical so much.
Yummy. Like
Yes.
the experience was just beautiful. And my heart was like connected. And so, how might it be if we just do more of that?
Well, and to your point, going all the way back to the beginning where we started, like where we don't know the little things we do that might make a difference and have a ripple effect, I think that's true for ourselves as well. You know, you don't know what kind of openness, possibility, experience you had as a result of filling up your cup in that way, right? And I think we take that for granted as well. You know, some of these little moves we do that don't seem logical on the business side are the very things we need
Yeah.
to renew our energy or have a different perspective. You know, I mentioned that I'm listening to all this comedy right now. It's forcing perspectives on things I hadn't thought about, and
Right.
that does contribute to me, my family, my business, all of those kinds of things. I think it's just not the way that we're used to prioritizing it. And I've been writing a lot lately about kind of mourning paradigms, the death of certain paradigms in my life and things that way. And there are so many of them that you just didn't realize. Like it's literally like we've signed ourselves up for all these games
Mhm.
that we don't even believe in. But oh, well, that's what everybody else is doing. I guess that's how it works, you know? And it's like I'm really working to like, you know, withdraw myself from, you know, being a participant on many of those games. And the more that I do that, the more space is available to
Mm,
make a totally new game or join someone in their totally new game that is just not how it's always been done, which brings immense joy to me.
yeah. Yeah. And so, thinking about what brings you joy, because I know we can go, like, I love this, these conversations really are a huge gift to me personally.
Yeah.
It's, I light up just knowing we're going to have these conversations. And so, thinking about that, like, what are some of the ways that you choose joy? And we've talked about many of them, but are
Yeah.
there any other practical ways that you choose joy consistently?
Yeah, and I think to your point, these podcasts has been such a surprising space of joy for me. You
Mhm.
know, in some ways I was telling a friend the other day like, gosh, I wonder if I just wrote the book so I could do the podcast so I could meet really amazing women and all over the, you know, country and in Canada and discover what they're doing because that has brought me joy. And but what about it brings me joy is my choice to show up authentically
Mhm.
and not have to have an agenda and just delightfully be with another spirit and see where it goes. So that kind of experience brings me a ton of joy. But to your point about regular rhythms and routines, like, so yesterday I was in a coffee shop and I let myself go down wormholes. And you and I talked about like setting timers to remind myself, like, I have to set timers. But I was interested in, I was in a physical space that was quite beautiful. And I love interior design and I love beauty and I love like unlocking what about it? What
Mhm.
about me in this space makes me feel so good? And so I started by just looking around and taking notes and journaling about what they had done, right? But then it took me down. They had curved archways everywhere, which brings me joy. But I've also resonated with more of like almost a Moroccan or Turkish kind of arches and the beauty of those. And so I went down this wormhole of just literally getting into Islamic architecture and geometry behind that. And then I'm when you do your 23andMe or whatever, your ancestry test, like I'm so Gaelic. I was hoping for something exotic and it's all just this little area. I'm like, all right, darn. But they have beautiful, symbolism in their architecture as well that reminded me of some of the Islamic architecture. So I let myself go down this wormhole of what they shared in common and what's the math. So like this has no quote unquote outcome in the world for what people would expect. But I have learned that there are certain spaces I delight in going down.
Yes.
That's one of them. Anything related to nature. We talked about the octopus, but any interesting, cool things and ways that nature works, the fact that trees talk to each other. I'm like over the moon about that stuff. And so like I will choose to go to a coffee shop and like Google like who's got a TED talk about this thing? Who's got a, whatever. And I'll listen to something and let myself write and journal and contemplate, like really contemplate unique different issues. So that brings me immense joy. Being in nature brings me immense joy. So like even living in the city, I try to walk every day if I can, at least for a little bit. And part of it is, yes, of course, it's good to move your body, but part of it is just to be in nature and hear birds and see green, and look at how people have planted things, or look at sitting in the alleyway, how there's a daylily poking its way between the trash cans brings me sheer joy and delight. So, but it is all these like little moments of things. And I think to your point, I know enough of them now that when I'm down and when I'm having a hard time, it's almost like I can, shake the hat and pick one out and just do it. And it will shift my space. And they're not big things, they're little things.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Even with you, and you mentioned in your walk, I appreciate how you turn your going for a walk from instead of calling it walks, but wanders.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah, for
even,
those who haven't read the book, I have to watch myself because I can get very measurement based and
yeah,
very obsessive. So it's like, oh, if it's all about 10,000 steps, then it's about 10,000 steps, and it completely removes all the joy.
yeah,
And and I found myself doing that. That's what Melanie's referring to. And so in order to put the joy back in, I had to reframe the whole thing and
yeah,
stop measuring. I had to say, I'm going to go wander around.
yeah,
And like if the steps come, they come in whatever quantity they come. And it does make for, I literally just changed the way I walk home from this certain place I like to go to. And in front of this college, there are these two big statues that are like, I had no idea what they were about. And then I was exploring what they, and they're these like angels it was like a nun order that had built this building originally that later got purchased. And they like one meant wisdom and one meant knowledge. And they're like flanking this building. And so like I had literally not seen it,
yeah.
even though I had passed it all these times. Right. But when I wander, I see more.
Yes, I love it because, and here's the thing, I don't just love it because I'm just saying it, but when we talked before, I didn't even realize how much you and I had in common.
Mm,
Like even with me, when I go on my walks, I don't have a set direction that I'm going to go in. I just allow my body to tell me when to turn right, when to turn left, and see what I
yeah.
discover. Like it's just so many different things that you and I share that it is almost mind blowing and then not. You
Well,
know,
and I think it is going back to like,
really.
this is what happens when we let spirit be in charge. And
Hmm.
again, I think it is what I knew when we met, which is, it's not like, for those that are listening, it's not like Mel and I knew each other for years and had this whole da 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 da. No, it was like
Yeah,
literally that moment in the coffee shop stands out in relief, and like it has this glow about it. But sometimes I think this is the beauty of being in life, is we get to have those experiences, and I think we get to discover them if we were discovering that for rationality, right? And I think, you and I probably talked about this at the time, like if we had been transactional in that experience, it would have been like, what do I need from her? What do I need from her? Right? Which is very much the way the world works often. And that's not what it was about. And I think we're, at least in my opinion, we're only in the beginning of the discovery of all these things we share in common. And this podcast was a beauty to like deepen that in a way we couldn't have anticipated, but we get to honor.
yes, yes. And that's what that's one of the things I really appreciate about it. And I was telling my husband about how I get to just play with all of these amazing women who are saying yes to sharing their stories on this podcast. And we're just, it's our way of giving back to the world, being detached from who's listening, what they take away, how, what it moves them to do, like detached from all of it, but just showing up in
Yes.
authenticity and just having real conversations.
Yes.
Not fluff,
Yes.
not fluff, but really speaking from our hearts. And that's why even in our exchange, there's this inner knowing that
Yeah.
it's not transactional. Like it's something that I can feel that makes
Yes.
it so meaningful.
Yes, here. And I think to that point of, for your listeners, but I love what you just said so beautifully about, that we get to do that, that's an opportunity that we get to have in life. And I really believe if as women we were all choosing that more, I really think it's revolutionary.
Yeah.
I think the impact, like what could happen, I think there's so much that could happen out of us orienting to our internal GPS,
Yeah.
in that space of play and joy and discovery to see where it might lead us. I think in ways we could never anticipate.
Yeah, just fully detach it and just allowing for it to all just unfold. And so I believe that joy and gratitude are partners. And
Mm.
so and they just play well together. And so what are you grateful for in this moment?
So many things. I'm grateful for this relationship. I'm grateful for this conversation. I am grateful for, like, the word gratitude I've often gotten stuck on because of a moral upbringing. But the game I've been playing with myself while I walk is right now, and I
Yeah.
fill in. So
Mhm.
I will say things like, I had some real foot pain 3 months ago. I'm like, right now, I'm so delighted that my foot is working great. Right now, I'm delighted I have no back pain. Right now, I'm delighted that there's a breeze hitting my face right now. And so I think to your point about what am I grateful for, so many things. Right now, I'm grateful that I have a plant on my desk that was near death and looks magnificent in this moment. I'm delighted to be able to support myself having interactions with humans I care about. I mean, I could go on and on, but there are literally so many things. But probably most potent in this moment is I'm grateful for a full heart after this conversation.
Mm. Mm. I'm just gonna just be with that for a moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Barbara, this has been wonderful. It's been more than wonderful. It has just been absolutely delicious. You know, like there's this, I'm getting ready to mess up my own quote now because I'm feeling emotional, but it's about life is so delicious when your heart is free.
Mm. Oh my gosh, that's gorgeous.
Yeah. And so I'm grateful for this deliciousness that I'm feeling right now, right here. And so how can people stay connected with you?
Yeah, well, they can go to beenough.com, beenough.com, which is a landing page within my website that has information about the book. And I also have these little weekly, things people can subscribe to that are just little pulled lessons from the book as a way to kind of stay connected. And then if, people are interested in the book itself, it's on barnesandnoble.com, it's on amazon.com, it's on all the regular spaces. And you have to look for Enough by Barbara Burgess because there are many enough books written out there. But anywhere on the website, there's places to opt in and explore. And I'd love to play with folks.
Yes, yes. And I'll be sure to place that in the show notes for to make it easily accessible for them. And quick story, when you said be enough, I went into cheer mode. Be enough, be enough.
Now you're going to get into, Melanie and I from childhood at some level here, except the one I knew was be aggressive. Is that the one you learned? Be aggressive, be aggressive.
Yeah. But when you said
But we'll do be enough.
be enough, I started hearing that chant in my head.
Oh my goodness. I
But
think I'm going to have to move that into a chair for sure.
yes, yes, just have at it, have fun with it. So I just so appreciate you being here. And to those who are listening in, thank you so much for tuning in once again to She Chose Joy. And just remember that your freedom lies within your decision to say yes to who you are, yes to what you want, and yes to what you stand for. And so you say yes to being enough in this moment, right here, right now. Until next time, be well. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and share. I never remember to say that.
Yes, please.